For many years, I shared an apartment in London with my friend Sherlock Holmes. My name is Dr. Watson. I worked as a doctor in the British Army for several years. While I was in the army, I travelled to many strange and interesting places. I had many exciting adventures. Then one day, in Afghanistan, I was shot in the shoulder. My wound was deep and took many months to heal. I nearly died from pain and fever. At last, I got better, but I could not work in the army any more. I retired from the army and came back to England. That is why I was living in London with Sherlock Holmes. I had known my friend for many years. Our address was 221B, Baker Street, in the centre of the city. I enjoyed sharing an apartment with Holmes. My friend was a very clever man. He was the most famous private detective in London. He helped to solve crimes and catch criminals. When people were in trouble or needed help, they came to Holmes. Sometimes the police came to Holmes and asked for help in catching a criminal. Sherlock Holmes did not care if his clients were rich or poor. He enjoyed solving their interesting problems. He was very happy when he was working. It was the most important thing in his life. One afternoon, I was reading a book and Holmes was standing by the window in our sitting room. Usually, he was very busy and active, but this afternoon he did not seem very happy. I was worried about my friend. "What's the matter with you today, Holmes?" I asked. "Come and stand at the window, Watson," Holmes said. "Look out into the street. See how uninteresting London is today." It was winter. The street outside was almost empty. Everyone was at home in front of their warm fires. "I need some work, Watson," said Holmes impatiently. "I cannot live without interesting problems and mysteries. That's why I became a private detective. I love my work. It keeps my brain active. But when there are no crimes and no mysteries to solve, then life becomes very boring for me." He turned sadly away from the window. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Our housekeeper came into the room. She was carrying a small white card on a silver tray. Holmes picked up the card. "Miss Mary Morstan," he read aloud. "I don't know anyone of that name. Please ask the lady to come in. Perhaps it is a new client." A few moments later, Miss Morstan entered the room. She was young and not very tall, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her clothes were not fashionable, but they were clean and tidy. She had a lovely face. I noticed at once that she looked worried and unhappy. "Please sit down, Miss Morstan," said Holmes kindly. "I am Sherlock Holmes, and this is my good friend, Dr. Watson. Dr. Watson and I have worked together many times." "I'm very pleased to meet you both," said the young lady. Then she turned to Holmes and looked at him with her lovely blue eyes. "Mr. Holmes, I've heard that you give people good advice. I'm not a rich woman, but I hope you can help me too. Something very strange has happened. Mr. Holmes, I need your help."
The picture sequence from the cinema has finished. You can look at it once more if you want.
Holmes rubbed his hands together excitedly. His eyes shone, and he leant forward in his chair. "Tell us your story," he said. Miss Morstan began her story, and we listened. "My father," she began, "was a captain in the army. When I was very young, he was sent to India. My mother was dead, and I had no other relatives in England. So, while my father was away, I was sent to school. When I was 17, I received a letter from my father. He said that he was leaving India and coming back to England. He gave me the address of a hotel in London. He asked me to meet him there. I was very happy and excited about seeing my dear father again. I went to London and arrived at the hotel. I asked for Captain Morstan, my father. but I was told by the hotel manager that my father was not there. He had gone out the night before and not returned. I waited all day and all night, but my father didn't come back to the hotel. Finally, I went to the police. They advertised for Captain Morstan in all the newspapers, but without success. I never saw my dear father again." Miss Morstan began to cry. Holmes opened his notebook.
"What was the date that your father disappeared?" he asked.
"It was the 3rd of December, 1878. Nearly 10 years ago."
"What happened to his luggage?"
"It was still at the hotel," replied Miss Morstan. "The cases contained some books and clothes and some paintings and ornaments from the Andaman Islands."
"The Andaman Islands? What are they?" I asked.
"A small group of islands near the coast of India," said Miss Morstan. "There is a prison on one of the islands. My father was one of the officers in charge of the prisoners. He worked there for many years."
"Did your father have any friends in London?" asked Holmes.
"Only one, Major Sholto. He was also in charge of the prisoners in the Andaman Islands. The Major had retired from the army some time before my father disappeared. He was living in London, and of course I went to see him, but he didn't know that my father had arrived in England."
"Your story is very interesting," said Holmes, rubbing his hands together once more. "Please, go on."
4 years after my father disappeared," continued Miss Morstan, "I saw an advertisement in the newspaper. The date was the 4th of May, 1882. To my surprise, the advertisement asked for the address of Miss Mary Morstan. It said that if I advertised my address, I would receive some very good news."
"What did you do?" asked Holmes.
"I advertised my address in the same newspaper. The next day, I received a small cardboard box. Inside the box was a lovely pearl, and I have received another 5 pearls since that day. They arrive every year on the same day. Look."
She opened a flat box and showed us 6 beautiful pearls. "There was no letter with the pearls?" asked Holmes.
"Nothing at all," replied Miss Morstan. Then she continued, "But the strangest thing of all happened this morning. That is why I came to see you. This morning I received a letter. Please read it."
"Thank you," said Holmes. He took the letter and studied it carefully. Then he handed it to me. London, the 17th of November, 1887. Dear Miss Morstan, go to the Lyceum Theatre tonight at 7 o'clock. Stand outside the entrance on the left. If you are afraid, bring 2 friends. Do not bring the police. You have been deceived, but you will learn the truth tonight. Your unknown friend.
"What can this letter mean?" asked Miss Morstan. "I'm afraid. What should I do, Mr. Holmes? You are a clever man and can give me good advice."
Holmes jumped up excitedly. "We shall go tonight to the Lyceum Theatre. The 3 of us. You and I and Dr. Watson. The letter asks you to bring 2 friends with you. You will come with us, won't you, Watson?"
"Of course," I said. "I'll be very happy to come." I was speaking the truth. I wanted to help Miss Morstan. "You are both very kind," said Miss Morstan. "Since my father disappeared, I have been alone in the world. I have no friends whom I can ask for help. What time shall we meet this evening?"
Holmes looked at his watch. "It's now 3:30, he said. "Come back at 6 o'clock. Don't be afraid, Miss Morstan. This evening we'll come with you to the Lyceum